police in Glendale, California cordoned off an area surrounding an SUV rented by the man suspected of going on a murderous Christmas Eve rampage.
Please come immediately.
Who's in your house?
Immediately.
Ma'am, is the guy in your house right now?
We're having 2 houses down.
What did she have that he could have wanted? She had nothing. She came home with her clothes in her car and her kids.
Severely injured during that explosion. He suffered third-degree burns on both arms. It also appears that the Santa Claus suit that he was wearing did melt onto his body.
It was a fateful night at the 2-story house about 22 miles east of Los Angeles in Covina, California. On the outset, it looked like a joyful Christmas Eve with nearly 30 people celebrating the upcoming holidays. It was the Ortega's favorite time of the year to spend with their children, Charles, James, Leticia, Alicia, and Sylvia. The house was full and there was nothing unusual in sight, so it seemed. But the clock was ticking. A tragedy was about to befall them. Isn't it unfortunate how life turns out for some people? Death comes to them uninvited, unexpected, and sometimes untimely. That's just the reality of it. The Ortega family was like any other American family, living a life full of dreams, hope, and joy. With a closely knit set of loved ones, they were anticipating Christmas that night. Little did they know it was the last time for 9 members of the family to share love and laughter.
Commit this crime and then flee the country. What it appears is that he didn't anticipate injuring himself to the point where obviously he took his own life.
Well, about 10 o'clock, the police officers knocked on the door and asked us to evacuate.
It was never like this. I'm shocked. I would never picture in my right mind he would ever do something to a family. I'm just devastated.
After Christmas Eve dinner, Joseph Ortega, 80, lovingly known as Papa Joe, his wife of 53 years, Alicia, 70, and their children were playing poker in the dining room. It was a boisterous evening like they used to have every year on Christmas. Their grandchildren played video games and some hung out in the backyard near the pool. Michael, the Ortega's 17-year-old grandson, was glued to his computer screen on the second floor. While everyone was celebrating the night, they heard a knock on the front door, and soon after that, the 8-year-old granddaughter, Katrina, squealed with joy. "Santa Claus! Santa Claus!" This was the beginning of the horror that was to haunt the Ortega's family forever. Before they could register what was happening, the man in the Santa Claus costume shot the little girl. 2 of her uncles came to the rescue, but they were also shot, wounded, and gasping for breath. Now that they were aware they were being targeted, 3 of the Ortega's daughters hid under the dining table for cover. Unfortunately, it was all in vain. The gunman shot them all. This was the end for 4 of the Ortega's children, 2 daughter-in-laws, and the teenage grandson, Michael. The killer was identified as Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, their daughter Sylvia's ex-husband. He was recognized by one of the Ortega's sons, Charles, after he shot his 8-year-old niece and his older brother, James. There was a cry from one of them. "It's Bruce," he had said. Both Charles and James succumbed to their injuries. According to reports, many of the guests present in the house were about to leave the party and were close to the front door when the attacker came in. Although survivors of the merciless massacre spoke with the investigators, their identities weren't revealed due to privacy and trauma that they have been experiencing. The eyewitnesses had a lot to share, and we'll get into the details of their accounts. The first person to report to the police was Ortega's neighbor, who, right after hearing gunshots and seeing fire break out, called 911. They cried, "Come immediately. They're burning down someone's house." It was then that the news broke out and the calls kept coming in. Leticia Uspolsky, the youngest daughter and mother of the wounded 8-year-old girl, was the only survivor among Ortega's children. While she was briefly hiding under the table, Leticia was able to call 911 and told the police, "I heard the shots." Everyone started panicking and running, and we all dove under the dining room table. In the call recording provided by 911, Leticia is heard screaming, "I need someone to come over and help my daughter. She's bleeding. She's been shot in the left side of the face." Leticia was frantic when she uttered these words while the emergency services dispatcher was trying to calm her down. The police arrived shortly after the call at that scene, and it was nothing less than chaotic. The house was burning, people were screaming, and trying to get out alive. One lieutenant described the scene as apocalyptic. The police were shocked when they were told someone dressed as Santa had unexpectedly appeared at the Ortega's residence and opened fire. After the shooting and setting the house on fire, the man left in the car about 11:45 p.m. The bodies they found were beyond recognition. Police used dental x-rays and other forensic methods to positively identify them. The Ortega's family had lost 9 of their family members, including the 17-year-old Michael, who had reportedly died from the explosion rather than a gun wound. It was chaotic, devastating, and barbaric to say the least. Life had changed for the survivors that night. The trauma and nightmares still linger even after a decade and a half of the pre-planned homicide. Coming back to the perpetrator, one cannot help but wonder what was it that led Bruce Pardo to commit such a heinous act. We know it was his ex-wife's family he had destroyed out of vengeance, but still, a man in his sane mind would never go to such an extent. It requires pure evil to pull off something like that. While the police were busy investigating the Christmas Eve massacre, they received a call from the house of Brad Pardo in neighboring Sylmar, California. Pardo had come home from a Christmas party to find his brother Bruce burnt and lying in a pool of blood. Upon an initial inquiry, they found a gunshot wound in Bruce's head and a pistol in his lap. His body was burned to the 3rd degree, and the Santa Claus costume had almost melted into his skin. He had killed his ex-wife, her parents, her sisters, her brothers, her sisters-in-law, and her nephew, and lastly, he killed himself. When we dig into Bruce's past, investigators uncovered that Bruce Pardo and his ex-wife Sylvia Ortega Ortiz had recently finalized their divorce just a few days before Christmas Eve. At this point, much more was still undiscovered about the tragedy, but the police still thought the deaths were no coincidence, which was later confirmed. After the autopsies were carried out, they found that all of the victims had been shot with a handgun that they found in Bruce's lap. Now, they had to figure out how the two cases were related, and things started unveiling, one after the other. It was a murder-suicide case, although it was not part of Bruce's plan to kill himself, but he was severely burned and probably realized it wouldn't be possible for him to escape for long. Investigations also showed that Bruce had packed his car with a computer, water, food, clothes, and maps of the U.S. and Mexico. He was probably hoping to escape after his killing spree, but fate had other plans for him. It was reported that there was an ongoing feud between Bruce and his ex-wife Sylvia. Sylvia was a single mother of 3 when she married Bruce. Although initially it seemed like an ideal marriage, things started to disintegrate when Sylvia discovered that Pardo had abandoned a brain-damaged son from his previous marriage. Just a year into the marriage, she had realized he had turned cold and reportedly told her friends that the marriage wasn't going as she had expected. While describing Bruce's state of mind prior to the killings, a witness said, "This divorce shattered Bruce Pardo. It became his obsession, and Bruce began to plot ways to get back at Sylvia. I think that he decided that he wasn't just going to kill her, but he was going to kill everything that she loved and take it and wipe it off the face of the earth." Sylvia must have known Bruce had issues, but she would have never imagined what he would do to her and her family. Some other details revealed that Bruce had recently been laid off from his job as a computer engineer due to fraudulent behavior. The divorce records indicate that he had been required to pay $10,000 to his ex-wife Sylvia. Investigators discovered $17,000 and a plane ticket to Canada tied to Pardo's body at the time of his death. While assisting with the investigation, Bruce's neighbor said, "I still wonder if the suit hadn't lit, how the story would have ended. It might have been a much different ending," referring to Bruce's plans if he had not burned himself critically. The story had ended for Bruce, while the healing began for the Ortega family's surviving members. They have dealt with a tragic incident with such grace and patience. The young 8-year-old survivor, Katrina, is now a 24-year-old gun violence survivor who actively participates in activities demanding a change to the current weapons laws. Katrina and a close friend created a video spreading awareness at a walkout in their school, telling participants that it's their duty to stand together as a generation to demand change. "I lived through it, and I'm still living my life as best I can. It's not stopping me. It's not instilling fear in me. I want that change. I don't want other families to go through what me and my family went through." Katrina and her family members are healing from the trauma Bruce induced on them on that fateful night in 2008. They're doing their best to create awareness and making conscious efforts to be a part of the change. As for Bruce, an FBI profile found that Bruce dealt with extreme narcissism and obsessive-compulsive disorder. While nothing justifies his action, it is important for the friends and families of such people to keep an eye on their activities. People with severe mental health issues need to be sent to therapy, and in extreme cases, they should be reported so that nobody gets harmed. It is ironic that nobody among Bruce's acquaintances had found him doing anything unusual before this event. However, the anger and grudge he withheld didn't end well. He could have channelized his emotions in a healthier way. Rather, he chose to go on a rampage, killing a family loved and cherished by everyone around. The Ortega's family has touched many lives with their tragedy. They continue to keep in touch with survivors and victims of gun violence and give them hope in the moments when only darkness can be seen. The fact that he showed up at the party with a Santa outfit puts a sick twist on it. "It's such a tragedy," said one of the neighbors, Dave Ritchie. "To carry out such a crime while you pretend to be Santa has left the survivors scarred and triggered for life. In an appearance on The Oprah Show in 2016, Leticia said, "I can't do anything to change what happened. I can only focus on the future. This is what he's done. Enough. I'm not going to allow you to continue to consume us with your evilness. You don't want that anger to live within you day to day and grow just like it did with this monster." While she navigates through her pain, Leticia refuses to give any power to the perpetrator. She lost her identity when her family died, but is determined to use her story as a motivation, not as a tragedy. Another aspect to this story is how gun violence has taken hundreds of lives throughout the U.S. and continues to do so. The rules surrounding gun licensing and access need to be changed. It is a critical situation right now, as every other week or month, someone innocent loses their lives at the hands of a lunatic who decides to open fire out of hatred, guilt, or whatever mental crisis they're going through. There is no justification for violence. While it may be hard to predict if somebody is going to go on a shooting spree, it is crucial to read behaviors and try to identify clues which may lead to prevention of such heartbreaking incidents. We send our love and our thoughts to the Ortega family and everyone else who has lost a loved one to gun violence. If you found this video useful or learned something, feel free to share in the comments below. Your feedback is valuable to us. See you in the next video.